Good day. For today's lesson is children's magazines. The history of the development of children's literature would be incomplete without including children's magazines. During the last half of the 19th century, magazines formed a significant part of children's literature. The first true magazine for English children was called The Charm, which appeared in 1852. In the United States, the first magazine really for children was the Juvenile Miscellany, which was published in 1827 and which emphasized American history and biography. Other magazines were Children's Life for Every Young Child, Story Parade for Older Children, and American Red Cross. Now let's go to Children's Book Awards. There are many book awards in children's literature, but the two most coveted awards are the Newberry Award and the Caldecott Medal. The Newberry Award is the oldest award in children's literature. It was established in 1922 in honor of John Newberry, who was regarded as the father of children's literature. This award is given every year to the author who has the most distinguished contribution to American literature for children during the preceding year. Hendrik van Loon, author of The Story of Mankind, received the first Newbery Award in 1922. The Caldecott Medal was established in 1938 in honor of Randolph Caldecott, who was regarded as the most eminently known illustrator of children's books in 19th century. This award is given yearly to the most distinguished American picture book for children during the preceding year. Dorothy Lathrop, author of Animals of the Bible, received the first recipient of Caldecott Award. The donor of the award is Frederick O. Melcher, who was the co-founder of Children's Book Week and editor of Publishers Weekly. The third is the Hans Christian Andersen Prize, which is an international award and was established in 1956. This award is given every 2 years to a book of fiction by International Board of Books for Young People. The board is composed of a committee of 5, each one from a different country. They judge the selections recommended by the board or library association of each country. Next is Janusz Korczak Award. It is an international award and was established in 1979. This award is given every 2 years to living writers whose books distinguished for human and artistic values serve to promote friendship and understanding among children all over the world. The award is given to two categories: books for children and books about children. The purpose of this award is to commemorate the achievements and sacrifices of Janusz Korczak, a great Polish humanist, pedagogue, and doctor whose love for children was manifested during the Nazi regime in the Second World War when he chose to submit to a ruthless death sentence together with his pupils. The sponsor of this award is the Polish section of International Board of Books for Young People. The judges are an international jury composed of renowned writers, literary critics, and experts in literature for children and adolescents. The prizes are Janusz Korczak medals and 50 zlotys each to be given Pole International Children's Book Day and is observed every year on April 2, the birthday of Hans Christian Andersen. In the Philippines, the National Children's Book Day is observed every Tuesday of July. Now let's move on to Chapter 2, which is about introducing children to literature. Mother Goose rhymes or nursery rhymes. For many children, Mother Goose rhymes are their introduction to the world of literature. Modern trends in child psychology or the scientific and technical movements of space age may frown upon the intrinsic values of these rhymes, which are not truly realistic in vocabulary and tendency, but nothing in current literature has replaced the venerable Mother Goose for nursery school age. As long as there are children, the Mother Goose rhymes will always live. Mother Goose rhymes and Mother Goose are nursery or simple verses for preschool children and even adults. But who was Mother Goose? Where did she live? Mother Goose probably never existed as a person or lived anywhere. She seems to be the personification of the well-loved storytellers who have existed since the world began. She first appeared on the frontispiece of Charles Perrault's book, The Tales of My Mother Goose, in 1697, a woman before a spinning wheel telling stories to three attentive children. Later, John Newberry published a book of simple rhymes for children, and he called the book Mother Goose Melody. Since then, Mother Goose became associated with rhymes. Characteristics of Mother Goose rhymes. First, the language pattern is varied, meaning the rhythm, the rhyme, and the alliteration and the gauging of words. Example: Wee Willie Winky runs through the town, upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown, tapping at the window and crying through the lock. Are all the children in their beds? It's past 8 o'clock. Next is number 2. The rhymes have a narrative quality. They tell a story. Example: Infobells! Little Miss Muffet. Do you want to listen to what happened to Little Miss Muffet? Of course. Tell us. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. There came a spider who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Next is, the rhymes offer many opportunities for active participation and response. Example: One, two, buckle my shoe. 3, 4, open the door. 5, 6, pick up sticks. 7, 8, lay them straight. 9, 10, do it again. 1, 2, buckle my shoe. 3, 4, open the door. 5, 6, pick up sticks. 7, 8, lay them straight. 9, 10, a big fat hen. Fourth, many child characters are present. Example is Jack and Jill, Little Jack Homer, Simple Simon, Little Bo Peep, Little Nanny Etiquette. 5. The rhymes are funny. Example is the song Humpty Dumpty. 6. Many rhymes are short and easy to remember. Example is Hickory Dickory Dock. 7. The subject matter of the rhymes are varied and within the interest of children. Examples are alphabets, moral, nonsensical, superstitious, aids to memory, scenes and incidents, character sketches, tongue twisters, counting, time, tales, riddle, gestures and actions, proverbs, and weather. Mother Goose rhymes are also accompanied by attractive illustrations and format. Now let's proceed to the values of Mother Goose rhymes. To the parents, the rhymes serve to relieve tensions from household chores for the mother, is the boredom of routine work for the father who comes home tired from work. The rhymes also enable the parents to teach their children the rudiments of learning with ease and pleasure. The rhymes bind the family together, the child looking forward to the nursery hour in the security of and warmth of his parents' love, and the parents experiencing the pleasure of participation. To the child, children love the rhythmic construction of the rhymes, which approximates music. The rhymes enable the parents to teach their children the rudiments of learning with ease. The narrative element enables them to tell the story themselves. The presence of child characters appeals to the children. The child learns and at the same time derives entertainment. The presence of child characters appeals to the children. To the teacher, the rhymes are vehicles for the improvement of pronunciation and enunciation. They help the teacher break the monotony or regimented schoolwork by acting as pleasant interludes. Now let us talk about poetry. Well, technically, poetry is a literary form written in verses, generally with rhyme and meter. It has an elusiveness that defies definition. Edgar Allan Poe calls poetry the creation of beauty in words. Poetry, on the other hand, has the power to evoke sensory images and deep emotional response. So it is not so much what is as how it makes us feel. Eleanor Farjeon, an author, said that poetry is not a rose, but the scent of the rose, not the sea, but the sound of the sea. There are many divisions and forms of poetry, but children are more interested in the contents of the poems and their emotional reaction to them than they are in knowing about the various forms of poetry. Thus, the teacher should be familiar with a wide range of poetry so that they can select the appropriate poem for the appropriate time and the appropriate age of the children. In selecting poetry for children, the following should be considered. First is the children's interests and needs. Second, their background or experience with poetry. Third, the types of poetry that will appeal to them. Remember that children's tastes for poetry are very similar to their preferences for prose. Poems about themselves and others. This is one of what children enjoy. Second is poems of everyday happenings. Third is poems about animals, whether real or comical. Fourth is poems about the weather or seasons, and humorous poetry. Also, poems of fantasy and make-believe, poems of wonder and wisdom, poems of adventure and accomplishment, poems of beauty, poems of historical interest. What about the values of poetry to children? Here are the values of poetry to children. First, poetry satisfies children's response to rhythm. The pattern and rhyme of poetry are enjoyed by children. The visual imagery of poems delights children. Poetry satisfies the children's aesthetic needs. Fifth, poetry increases the children's sensitivity to an idea or a mood. Narrative elements in poetry are enjoyed by children. Now, there are divisions of poetry. Although many of the types of poetry are not appropriate for children, the following division of poetry are given below for the information and knowledge of students of children's literature. So, poetry is divided into three great classes. First one is the narrative, next is lyric and dramatic. There are also special types and minor forms, but we're going to talk first about narrative poetry. Narrative poetry tells a story, and there are four kinds of narrative poetry. The first is epic. This is a long narrative poem elevated in style, serious in tone, dealing with a racial or national theme, and with heroic and supernatural characters. The epic poetry has types. The first one is folk epic. This came from the early people and has no known author. Example is Beowulf. The second is literary epic. This is the product of literary mind. Example is Paradise Lost by John Milton. Another type of narrative poetry is metrical romance. This is a long rambling story characteristic of the Middle Ages when knighthood was in flower. Example, Sir Gawain and Green Knight. And another type is metrical tale. Metrical tale is simple, straightforward, and realistic story of any emotion or phase of life. Example is the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Fourth is ballad. What is ballad? This is a short narrative poem that is sung. There are two kinds of ballad. First is the popular or folk ballad and artistic ballad. Popular or folk ballad came from the early people and has no known author. Example is The Wife of Asher's Well. Next is artistic ballad. This is the product of literary mind. Example is Tommy by Rudyard Kipling. Another type of poetry is lyric poetry. This kind of poetry does not tell a story. It expresses the emotions of the author. However, there are 5 kinds of lyric poetry. Here are they. First is ode, elegy, sonnet, simple lyric, and song. What is ode? This is a lyric poem in praise of a person or thing. Example is Ode to the West Wind by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Next is elegy. Elegy is a lyric poem in honor of the dead or about death. Example is Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray. Next is sonnet. This is a lyric poem of 14 iambic pentameter lines. Example is Sonnets from Portuguese by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Another example of lyric poem is song. This is a lyric poem that is sung. Example is Old Lang Syne by Robert Brown. If you want to know about this song, this is how to sing the song.
Be your pint stout, and surely I'll be mine. I will take a cup of kindness yet for Old Lang Syne. For Old Lang Syne, my dear, for Old Lang Syne. We'll take a cup of kindness yet for Old Lang Syne. We twa hae run about the braes and put the gowans fine, but we've wandered mony a weary fit sin' Old Lang Syne. For Old Lang Syne, my dear, for Old Lang Syne. We'll take a cup of kindness yet for Old Lang Syne.
Next is simple lyric. What is simple lyric? This is a lyric poem that does not belong under any of other types of lyric poem. It touches every mood or emotion of the heart. Example is El Allegro by John Milton. The last type of poetry is dramatic poetry. This kind of poetic form that sets forth life and character by means of speech and action. Dramatic poetry is divided into poetic plays or poetic dramas. Poetic plays or poetic dramas are acted out on stage, and there are 3 kinds of poetic plays and 2 lesser forms. The first one is comedy, second dramatic history, tragedy, and the lesser forms, which include the farce and the melodrama. Comedy. This normally has a happy ending. The hero or the heroine overcomes obstacles. Example is The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. Tragedy. This ends with death or the hero or heroine is overcome by obstacles. Example is Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Dramatic history, however, is based on historical facts such as a period in history or a national hero, which is the center around in which the drama is built. Next, the lesser forms. Let's talk first about the farce. In this type of drama, the situation and the characters are ridiculous and do not stimulate thought. Example is The Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. The last melodrama. The events follow each other rapidly but seem always to be governed by chance. The characters are victims in the hands of a merciless fate. Example is Titus Andronicus by William Shakespeare. Other types of poetry. First is limerick. This is a form of nonsense poetry which consists of 5 verses. The first, second, and fifth line rhyme together. Edward Lear was the master creator of the limerick. Next is the example of limerick. This is the example of it. A homely young lady named Grace biased off to explore outer space. She met a young spaceman. He took one look and ran. Where on earth did you find such a face? Second is haiku. This is a very short poem of Japanese origin. It consists of only 17 syllable form. So this is an example of a haiku written by Kirai. This is already the English translation. Third is tanka. Tanka is also of Japanese origin. It has 31 syllable forms. Both the haiku and the tanka are characterized by extreme conciseness and concreteness. This is very short. An example of tanka written by Basho. And what are the different forms of poetry? There are 4 forms of poetry. The first one is metrical verses. Metrical verses have rhyme and meter, while blank verse has iambic pentameter verse without rhyme. Free verse poetry, however, without rhyme and meter. And the prose poem is written in free verse but in a paragraph form. So that is the end of our lesson for today. I hope you have learned something.